I feel like there is a tendency, because of this anti-authoritarian moment that we seem to be in, to view science as authoritarian. And then to rebel against it, we look to heroes and people like Terrence or Candace Owens or people like Tucker Carlson, and they get enormous platforms because of their social media stature. But to me, to listen to people who have no domain expertise and no proven track record is an affront to actual practicing scientists. And it's fine to have a hobby. It's fine to do things, out of an avocation, a love for it. But it's a bit, to me, an example of the halo effect, which is a cognitive bias. And you have people you're listening to. In some cases, it's akin to listening to your friend Piers, Andrew Tate for marital advice. It's he may be a great MMA star, and Terrence may be a great actor, but that gives them no and confers no benefit to their scientific practices. And it would be like me going on to the set of Iron Man and trying to be like Terrence. You would laugh me off the stage, and rightfully so. So we have to look at and examine these claims that amateurs can do good science. Eric pointed out in the interview that there's some babies in with the bathwater. And I'd love to ask my dear friend Eric to expound upon those particular babies, because to me, to say that there might be some angle or something like that, or some drone, or it sounds to me a little bit like damning with faint praise as well. Because if you go through and there's 97 patents that he claims he has, we go through them, we find out that very few of them have been granted. There may be a couple that have been granted. You go through 1 × 1 = 2. Eric demonstrated clearly that's not the case. You go through the periodic table. His ideas are completely wrong there. His claims about gravity and building planets, that he's built the planet Saturn, or it comes out of a biological digestive process of the sun. These things are completely fallacious. So I think there's a danger, and it's a symptom of the halo effect.
I mean, just in point about Andrew Tate, he's not a friend of mine. He's someone I've interviewed 3 times. But the point I make about him, I had this debate with someone the other day, is he has a huge following on social media, regardless of whether people like me interview him. At least when I interview him, I get a chance to challenge him. And I've really noticed when young men in particular come up to me in the street, which they do with alarming regularity about Andrew Tate, that actually the conversation I have with them has moved from, God, Andrew Tate, isn't he amazing, blah, 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 to, I really liked it when you challenged him about this, this, and this. In other words, shining a light on people like Andrew Tate, actually challenging them on a big platform, I see tangible impact on the street of those challenges kicking through into people's consciousness in a way they wouldn't if he was just able to do his thing slightly below radar on social media without ever being challenged. So that's my kind of theory about why I interview people like him, which is in itself open to debate, obviously. Eric, just in that response to the baby and bathwater, what would you say to Brian Keating's point there?
Well, I tried to say it already, that if you take the vertices of a tetrahedron as measured from the center, you're looking at an angle of the arc cosine of -1/3, which is about 109.47 in degrees. And if you take the interior angles of a regular pentagon, it's 108. So 108 is not 109.47, but it is close enough so that within engineering tolerances, you can put 6 of these motors into a regular tetrahedron, and then you can potentially, therefore, traverse all of the dimensions needed to orient the object around its center of mass and to move it to any point in 3-dimensional space. I've stated that clearly to any technical person who wants to hear it. It may be that there's prior art, and it may be that it doesn't end up being that interesting because of the tolerances or it's too difficult to work. That's fine. But I've already stated what the baby is. And further, Brian, I was very surprised that you just corrected me on social media. Now, of course, we're friends, and so I don't mind having this back and forth. But you stated that in my field, that peer review is much older than Ghislaine Maxwell, who was born in 1961. And you cited a bunch of journals in physics. And in fact, that's simply not true. In part, I have Melinda Baldwin's article here, which says However, most papers accepted for physical review never went out to referees at all. The editor accepted most papers on its own authority, consulting referees only when he thought he might want to reject a paper. It was not until the 1960s that all physical review papers were sent out for external referee opinion. More or less, peer review comes out of Utah in 1972 through Senator Wallace Bennett's amendment that forces the issue into the NIH framework, because the Medicare Act was established in 1965, making the US taxpayer responsible for medical payments, that they suddenly wanted access to knowing, why are we paying all of this money to doctors without the ability to question them? So, in part, what I'm astounded by is that we're not even aware of our own history. If George Green, the miller, with no formal education, mailed off a solution to an inversion problem for differential operators, which is what gives us Green's functions, which Feynman made famous, he didn't have any training whatsoever. It's in part very dangerous to be offended when people listen to what we say and they then say, I keep hearing that science is for everyone and that mathematics is a great place to play. There are no bad questions. And then when they appear to take an interest, we cut their heads off. And my feeling is that I'm not going to do that. I'm going to state what this is. This is an elite activity. It's elite the way a violinist is elite. It's elite the way a surgeon is an elite brain surgeon. You're not going to have somebody say, hey, I've been doing brain surgery in my backyard on my family members and I'm ready for prime time. We are not honest about the extent that this is an elite community. And the last thing that I would add to what you said is, part of the problem is, where are the dissident scientists who don't go along inside of the university system, inside of the research institutions? If you had them, they would have been tarred and feathered during DEI, because they would have said, who are these foreign intruders into the academic arena? We must fire them and get them out. Claudine Gay could never have become president of Harvard. What we've done is we've gotten rid of all of the dissenting experts. And the dissenting experts who are going to get up and at the top of their lungs say, hey, we've got a disaster in theoretical physics at the moment. We have an abomination in the way in which we are pretending that random mutation is decidedly the main engine of Darwinian selection. We're going to pretend that neoclassical economics is on solid ground. All of these things are just absolutely silly. And effectively, there are no professors who are standing up in good standing as experts doing the job that now Candace Owens is going to fill. Okay. And I promise you that it's more expensive to get rid of your dissenters who actually know what they're talking about than it is to open it up to a public that wonders whether they've just shortened the life of their child by giving them an unnecessary experimental pseudo-vaccine.